Michael Schumacher was due here third in 2000, second last year, and the winner of the 2002 British Grand Prix. Barrichello making a 16-point maximum for Ferrari. Let us go straight.
Unfortunately, young Massa there was already on the grass and spun off onto the extra tarmac. But superb start for Jensen, really got his act together. AC Massa, 360 a couple of times. Luckily for him, kept the engine going and off he went.
I think one of the great things about the race was that the heavyweights, Montoya and Michael Schumacher, really did go eyeball to eyeball, and we saw a terrific early scrap between them, Mark.
I think this is what we're all here to see. I mean, this is real racing, and this race has just set the scene for what I hope is going to come in the future. But here with Michael Schumacher, just getting his eyeballs full of the rear of that Williams and the Michelins there, which weren't the tyre of the day, unfortunately, but Michael certainly made him pay for it by the end of the race, didn't he?
We've totted them up, Tony, haven't we? 49 pit stops in all at the British Grand Prix. David Coulthard had 4 of them. He gambled and he led the race for a while, but it was never really going to be his day, was it?
Well, he could have been a hero, couldn't he? Not even the best weather forecaster could predict that the rain was going to continue or whether it had stopped. If it had stopped, David might have gone to his hat-trick of British Grand Prix wins, you never know. But those shots said it all. I mean, we savoured all those shots, those in-car shots, and then the shots of him going from lot to lot was superb. You used to do all that.
I think what Martin said in the commentary, you know, what people might not understand is from outside, you think, oh, the car's on the ground there, it should be gripping, there should be no problem. They're world-class drivers, but believe me, when the conditions are such and you don't have the grip, there's nothing you can do. It's going to come off the road sooner or later.
Well, as soon as it started to rain here, Mark, we looked towards the Bridgestone-shod Ferrari, we looked towards Michael Schumacher, and Montoya was powerless to hold him back.
No, I mean, Montoya tried his best, and, you know, here he just overcooked it a little bit under braking. Michael Schumacher with the Bridgestone there with the intermediate tyre has exceptional amount more grip. That was the end of that manoeuvre there, but, you know, the tyre was the situation of today. You either had a Bridgestone, which is one thing, you had the intermediates right, and you had a package of the Ferrari, and that was it.
Right.
But I mean, just following up from the last race, it was all about tyres, because you remember, we talked about Montoya's car at the side after he hit Coulthard, and there was the bald Michelin tyre, because it was literally on its canvas. But Williams have worked very, very hard, testing in Barcelona last week, to try and get to use their rear tyres better, but it was still the rear tyre was a problem, and Irvine said the same thing.
OK, we're going to have a word with Jenson Button now, almost finished the British Grand Prix. Here's his story with Louise.
Jensen, looked like some kind of technical problem for you.
I'm not sure exactly, but the front left wheel was moving, so I came into the pits, and we didn't want to risk it really just to finish the race, so we stopped.
Not been a good weekend, has it? I mean, yesterday things went wrong, and again today.
The first lap was all right. I was up to 7th and from 12th, so it wasn't too bad. And then, yeah, I mean, we couldn't do much after that. The balance was a bit understeering, but the car was handling pretty well. And then the rain, the dry, and it was just really, really difficult for us. And we found it very difficult in the wet and intermediate conditions, as I think all of the Michelin runners did.
How difficult was it for you to keep it on the black stuff out there?
Sometimes very, very difficult. I mean, the first few laps on the wet was okay because the circuit was pretty wet, and then it seemed to dry very, very quickly. And then you had real problems with the rear sliding around, overheating and graining. So it was pretty difficult. But there you go. Hopefully we'll do a bit better next time.
Thanks, gents.
Cheers.
He obviously didn't enjoy it. We all did. When you rejoin us, there'll be that competition. There'll be a couple of emails as well. We'll be talking to BAR's Dave Richards. We'll be right back. Wonderful British Grand Prix for British American Racing and their boss Dave Richards, who joins us now. Not a point all season, and then both cars in the top 6. Explain.
Well, you know, it's perseverance. You just keep on plugging away, and if you do the job properly, it comes to you at the end of the day.
Was there a bit of luck involved as well? Because a lot of hard luck stories emanating from the pits after this Grand Prix.
You know, there is always a bit of luck in everything you do in motorsport, but no, this was all about teamwork. Every single person played their part, obviously from the drivers right the way through to the pit crew, who did a great job. Helicopter pilot up in the air telling us when the rain was coming in and when it would stop. everything worked according to plan.
You managed to get your helicopter in the air here, did you? Because a lot of people didn't.
No, he was up there just hanging on in there, watching and telling us when the window was going to come and when it was going to stop. So there's Alistair on the lollipop for the pit stops, who's rushed back to the Banbury Horton Hospital to see his first child being born this afternoon, hopefully. His wife's in labour.
Yeah, no, we've already spoken to Alistair, and he's going to be on the phone and give us the latest news of any developments at Banbury Hospital. But, I mean, you talk about Banbury, you're based not so far away, aren't you, at Brackley. How much does it mean to you to have a result like this so close to home?
Well, you know, the reality is in a motor racing team, it's not just the drivers who deserve all the credit. It's all the unsung heroes, the people back at base who make the cars, who build all the parts. And luckily, a lot of them are here today to watch the race, or if they're not, they're just nearby watching it on television with you. So it's for those guys and everybody. I feel so pleased for them.
I'm sure you feel pleased as well for both your drivers. Let's talk first of all about Olivier Panis. It's that point has been a long time coming for him.
Yes, he's one of the most optimistic people I've ever met. He had a torrid start to the season, didn't finish a race for the first 5 races, and here he is really slogging away, never gives up, always comes in the morning and says hello to everybody, and has a great optimistic approach to things.
How about Jacques Villeneuve now after this result and his future with your team?
Well, you know, Jacques and I get on very well, despite what all the press have been saying, and he really does drive his heart out, and when situations like this occur, you can see the spirit that he has and the complete determination he has, and the way he drove today.
And looking down the line a bit for us, if you could, would you reckon that you'd still have him in your team next season?
Oh, there's no question about it. We've got a great lineup, a great team, both drivers, engineers, right the way through the organisation. So when you get good teams, you try and keep them together.
Just to take a step back, could you, and describe the British Grand Prix from your point of view?
Well, obviously the weather played the biggest part in it. We started here, stood on the grid there, looking around the skies. We'd already been on the telephone. We put the helicopter up in the air, and everyone was saying, well, there is some rain out there. Originally, the weather forecast was going to be a good, dry, sunny day by lunchtime, and so it caught us slightly unawares. And then it quietly unfolded. As soon as we saw that shower come in, we were expecting it only to be 15 minutes, but it just slowed up, and the rain just stayed on in there. Luckily, we managed to fuel it, or we planned to fuel it for as long as possible in the middle stint and stayed on the intermediates, and the window came just right for us as we changed onto the slicks for the last 20 laps.
Just finally, you enjoy Formula One racing, you enjoy racing full stop. You're going to have an enjoyable night tonight?
I think it's going to be a small celebration in Brackley, yes, you're right.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Dave.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. OK, let's go back and have a look at the Grand Prix, not at the VAR cars, but at David Coulthard, who had all sorts of things happen to him in this race. He was so confident going into it and so relaxed. And there's one of many problematical pit stops that we saw today.
Yeah, I mean, that looked like Irvine in '99 in his Ferrari coming in and waiting for the wheels, and it was a rear for the Ferrari. This time it was a front right. But it was a question of miscommunication, and many times the teams will tell you that the radios don't always work all the way around the lap. With a sort of static and interference on that, it's very easy to misinterpret a message, and that's why they always have to check the pit boards as well.
You've been on the receiving end of those radio messages.
Yeah, it is quite difficult, and especially in poor conditions as well. You're over time on concentration, trying to make sure you keep it on the black stuff, so to speak, and the team may respond with a message. You might not catch all of it, you may get half of it, and mistakes can get made. Sometimes you come in too early, sometimes you come in too late.
Let's have a look at Eddie Irvine. I mean, Jaguar had great expectations for this weekend. Irvine has made it very clear he doesn't like driving here, and he won't like looking at this.
Well, I think Eddie's day is sort of like Eddie's season at the moment in what's going on. There's no results coming whatsoever, and I think Jaguar at this point in time are at an all-time low. There's got to be some changes there. Whether those changes will be Eddie Irvine for next season, we'll have to wait and see. But you know, the writing's on the wall.
Do you feel that Eddie Irvine might just feel now that he's had enough of Formula One?
There's all this talk about Eddie Irvine, you know, may leave next year because he's not happy. I don't think that's the question being asked. I think the question's being asked whether Eddie Irvine's worth the value what they put into him at the moment. They could spend a lot of that money on developing the car, save themselves a lot of budget, put somebody else in the car, and maybe have another 5 years of that driver.
Tony, Ralph Schumacher, I mean, you've worked down there in the pits, and his fuel rig had terrible problems getting this fuel rig on. In fact, both of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was a recurring problem for another team. This was a recurring problem for Williams BMW. It happened in Canada, and they had to take the reserve out. That caused him points, then a loss of points because he dropped to 7th place in Canada. He dropped way down the order today. And they said with his Intertech fuel rigs, which everybody has to have. It's standard equipment. Then we're going to investigate it. We cannot afford to have this happen again. It's happened again. My only theory, I don't know whether you feel this happens, Mark, but because it's an aircraft style male female, and it's, it just relies on two surfaces going so close together. With the rain and the dirt and everyone spinning, I don't know, in those cases there could have been a bit of it takes just a little bit like that and you can't get the contact on the surfaces, and then you can't link up the hose properly. It's a very heavy piece of equipment.
And the similar sort of thing happened to David Coulthard as well, as if he need anything else to happen to him.
And this is it as well. And of course, it's always frantic down there in this pits, especially with a race like this where it's wet, dry, damp, and they're in and out of the pits, as David was 4 times, as we've said. Very, very difficult for everybody under a lot of pressure. And for the blokes to actually get their spare hose over so quickly is a mark of a well-drilled team. And Michael McGlynn and his people know what they're doing.
It's been a horrible British Grand Prix, really, for McLaren, for Coulthard and for Kimi Raikkonen. Ron Dennis is the McLaren team boss. Let's see what he's got to say about it. Here he is with Ted Kravitz.
Ron, it was on a similar kind of day back in '93 in Donington where McLaren scored maybe one of their best victories. A very different day and a bit worse luck.
Indeed. To be honest, it wasn't made any better by the